Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host, Rosie Gill-Moss, and joining me today is the lovely Maria. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Widowed AF, and thank you ever so much for being brave enough to come and sit behind the screen and talk to me. I know personally how terrifying it is.
Yes, it's very nerve-wracking.
I promise you're in good hands. So, Maria, now your story is different to any that I've had on this podcast before. Now, I don't want to give our listeners too much away because I'd like you to explain things in your own words. But your wife Mandy died from ovarian cancer about 8 years ago, and since then you have transitioned to Maria. Now, this is a really enormous step to take, and it's especially enormous to take after the loss of your wife. So, I'm actually really excited to hear your story, which I imagine will come with plenty of heartache as well. But I hope that you feel safe enough to tell us here. So basically, without much further ado, Maria, when you're ready, tell your story.
Thank you. I've had to write down a timeline for this because there are so many things that are to do with my wife's death and life, and I needed to get them all in, all the ducks in a row to get this done. So before my wife was ill, in fact, the day that she was ill, we were looking for a diagnosis for my daughter. And the reason was that because my daughter and my son are adopted. And before that is because we tried for our own child, and my wife had to deliver our son stillborn at 31 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
So I was trying to think of what to call. You've got a name for all of the episodes, and stubborn, I think, is the one that I would say for us. In fact, when she was having her one of her chemos, the actual the consultant said, "You never want to do things easy, do you, Mrs. Margetts?" Which always stuck in my head.
I have a lot of stubborn patients or former patients whose spouses I speak to. But can I just clarify that? So you were looking, the day you found out that your wife was ill was the day that she delivered a stillborn son. Is that right?
No.
Oh, sorry. I need your timeline.
That's okay. So we got married in December of 1990. We tried one number of things and realized that we weren't getting anywhere, so we had to do IVF. And my wife had found out that Nathan had died and had to give birth to him on the 4th of July 1995.
I'm so sorry.
Then we tried again for IVF, didn't work. We'd run out of money anyway, pretty much. So we then could spend the next 3 years going through Birmingham City social services, trying as an adopter.
Yeah.
We then got went to panel and got told that we can adopt. That was in the July of August of 2001. Okay. We then had our social worker come to us and say, here's a child that we think would be suitable for you. Got shown a couple of little pictures, and we'd always been told, don't pick the first one. Don't pick the first one. Things people say is just ridiculous, but
I can imagine.
We looked at these pictures and said, can we think about it? Can we talk about it? We spent all night talking about this. Phoned her up the next morning and said, we can't think of any reason why we can't be matched with this child. And she said, well, that's good because you've already gone to panel and it's yours.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
And how old was he?
And So how old was he?
Yeah.
He was 11 months
Oh, so
old.
baby.
Yes. Well, not so much of a baby. He 11 months. He was running about.
Oh.
So we had nothing ready. We went from not knowing to being pregnant to having a child in 3 weeks.
Wow.
So we had to get 2 weeks to get his room ready. We then had a week with the foster mom, and on the Thursday they said you can take him home.
Wow.
And he was then. So I always remember the clock going back or forward, back
Spring forward, fall back.
a month. Yes, a month later, and he had an awful sleep pattern. And I was looking out to the patio at 4 a.m. on that Sunday, with him running around behind me, and I'm thinking, well, what the hell have I done?
I've had those thoughts many times with small children.
So we then had Alex, and then we had Louise 3 years later.
And she was
but we had this. So Louise was 7 months old.
Okay. This is my need for detail. I realise it's annoying when I keep asking, but I like to know everything.
So they're the same birth mom and dad.
Okay.
They were put into care straight away. And so we had issues with Alex's adoption because social services hadn't asked all of the other adopted children's moms and dads whether they wanted Alex. So one of them took Birmingham City Council to court, and there was a point where we may not have had him. But finally we got to adopt him. We then adopted Louise about 2.5, 3 years later. 7 months old. So she was just over a year old when we adopted her. And then they would chalk and cheese. And it wasn't until, and we all thought, oh, it's just the way that kids develop.
Yeah.
But when she went to nursery, nursery said, we think there's something seriously wrong here.
Oh, God.
And we sort of went, okay, well, we think so too. We'd been with the pediatrician, and this was in 2008, and we were going for our last meeting with the pediatrician, and because they tried and looked at all sorts of different things and nothing fitted. That morning, we'd seen something on the BBC website about Julia Brown and FASD Trust, and learned about a new thing that I'd never heard of.
I've never heard of
and most people that I speak to haven't heard it. So it's a thing called Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder.
When you say that, yes, I have heard of it. Yes, and sadly, I have seen the impact that has.
So
not personally.
Mom had drank heavily during her pregnancy with Louise, and Alex hadn't had that happen because she was in sheltered accommodation at the time, so she couldn't drink while she was living there.
Right.
But she disappeared during Louise's pregnancy, and the first thing anybody knew about her was when she turned up at A&E having Louise.
Gosh.
So we started looking at this, and went to the pediatrician, showed her this article, and she said, "Okay, we will get the women's hospital geneticist department to come and talk to you." The day they came, my wife was very ill and couldn't come downstairs.
And was that
So
unusual?
no, yeah, very, very much so. My wife was very healthy. And yeah, so I gave the geneticists department all the information, so gave them some pictures, and they said, well, it's going to be 36 weeks until we even look at this, because of the backlog.
Sounds about right.
And I said, fine, okay. In that 36 weeks, when we got the diagnosis, my wife was ill a couple of times, so much so that I took her to A&E. They thought it was gallstones.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a scan of her chest area, and then they said, do you mind if we take a scan down below? And they found a mass. And so she was sent to the consultant. We saw the consultant. He said, yes, it looks like you have ovarian cancer. She then had biopsies. She had a plan of action in what they were going to do. They then found that she was having trouble breathing. And what was actually happening was that the mass was creating a fluid and was pushing it up through a diaphragm into a chest cavity. And this fluid was stopping her from breathing. So she had to have a lumbar puncture to drain all the fluid out of her chest cavity.
Oh, the poor woman.
And the week that we got this letter from the geneticists department, she'd gone into hospital, had a hysterectomy and bowel resection because the tumor had attached itself to a bowel. And we got this message back from them confirming that Louise had FASD.
So all in the same period of time.
So in the period of 6 months, this had all happened, and she had come out of hospital. She then started chemo, lost her hair on the first treatment, but carried on normal. And this is the thing about my wife: everything was trying to keep things as normal as possible. It was me that was the one that was struggling, because of what was happening. So not only were we having to deal with Louise's diagnosis and what was happening at school, all through her illness, but things were happening at her illness. So the second treatment she had, or second session she had, was a two-part thing, carboplatin and Taxol.
See, everybody who's lived with somebody with a cancer diagnosis has got all this medical jargon and knowledge that they never imagined they would need. And you have to become a sort of instant expert, don't you?
Yes. Well, to a lot of extent, yes. So these treatment rooms are very open plan. So she's lying down with tubes in her arm, and first one goes okay. She comes to the second part and says, "Oh, I don't feel too good." And within 30 seconds, I've been thrown out of the way, and her blood pressure is dropping so much that they're ready to give her a adrenaline injection through her sternum, through her chest, to keep her alive. They stabilise her and they go, well, we won't do that again. So she tries different things over the period of her illness. The chemo comes back and says it's all clear. She then gets a frozen shoulder, and the frozen shoulder is due to the manhandling, for want of a better word, that she's having to do with Louise to get her to school.
Yeah.
So what would happen is that I'd be up early. I'd be out of the house at 7, in work at 8, and I would not know anything until I got home at 5 o'clock and start cooking, and then say goodnight to the kids. So Mandy was the person who was looking after the kids. So she got this frozen shoulder, which took about a year to sort out. She was a little pain-free for a little time, and then starts getting pain in the other shoulder. She's gone back for checkups to the oncology, and they say something's come back. It's metastasized because she's got no ovaries left. And the reason where she's got it is in her ribs. And that's due to this fluid pushing through her diaphragm the years before. The fluid, the cancerous fluid, had metastasized, gone into her ribs, and was inoperable.
Oh,
So
God.
we got told that she would have 5 years to live, possibly.
Yeah.
And of course, we, us being us, we just sort of, right, okay, let's just plod on. She tried to keep things as normal as possible, but where the tumor was in her ribs was pushing against the intercostal nerve in her back, and she was in constant agony. So much so that I have a hole in my coat cupboard door where she's punched the door just to get a different pane, to get away from the one that that's always in her back.
That's really bothered me. That has, that poor woman.
And the thing was that they tried different treatments. And what was happening, and which is why I'm saying stuffing, is that the treatments never actually did anything other than switch it off.
Right.
So it would stop producing cancerous cells, which are the markers. And they would try it for a little while, but they would only be able to do things for a certain amount of time. And then they would try something else, and then they would try something else. So she actually went through the menopause at least twice.
Oh, gosh.
So she went through it first when she had the hysterectomy.
Yeah.
And then she was on a hormone replacement treatment, which they thought may help. And that's so again she went through it again. When she came off that, she and this pain is always there.
And you just can't imagine living in the kind of agony that these people must be in when the cancer is causing so much pain. It's it's really evil, isn't it? It almost feels like this kind of like a vindictive creature that gets into your body and just rips you apart. It scares the shit out of me, quite frankly.
Well, she coped with it amazingly well.
She sounds wonderful.
She was going to St Mary's Hospice on Rattlebarn Road in Silly in Birmingham. And so each week she was going for a day, meeting up with other terminal patients, and got to know these lovely people around her. But all through the last 3 years when she got this second bout of cancer, she was having to go and have respite for a week or 2 or 3 to get her batteries back more than anything else. Louise is intense, and trying to get her to go to school, which she really didn't want to do, was very hard. In fact, so I would get to work, start off, and at 10 o'clock, 10:30, I'd go and get a coffee, and I'd phone her up and hear, through tears, what her morning had been like. So much so that when she died, that first 6 months, I was doing just that. I was getting up to get a coffee, picking my phone up and going to phone her.
Yeah.
And like Pavlov's dog, it was just an automatic response. And it wasn't just once or twice. I was doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And it was getting me really upset because, it's like I wanted to know how her morning had gone and she's just not there.
I know.
So she was she was always in pain. She'd get on with things, but come to 2014, she's really struggling. So much so that the house has descended into chaos. There were black bags full of washing, to be washed, having been washed, but not dried and not put away.
Half dried, slightly smelly in a tumble dryer. I know the drill here.
And even this was even with her mom taking stuff to her mom's. So I decided I needed to have some time off, so I went off sick, and spent the last 4 months trying to get into a routine because I could see that these things were going to happen, and there was no avoiding what was the inevitable. But we're still thinking it's going to be a couple of years, 2-3 years. We then get a call from her consultant. There is a treatment that she can have to get rid of the pain, either in Oldham or in Plymouth. So Oldham's much nearer, so we go and see this consultant in the Royal Oldham Hospital. So we meet him in a reception room, a waiting room, sorry. And he says, right, this is what we're going to do. And he lies down. And we're looking at him going, what the hell's going on? And he says, you're going to be like this. We're going to raise your head up. And he lifted his head up. And he says, we're going to be underneath you. And we're going to put a needle into your spinal cord. And we will move this needle around. And you have to tell us, while you're conscious, what you're feeling.
Oh, God.
And when you tell us the right thing, what will happen is that the needle is hollow. A wire will come out of the needle, glow red hot, and it'll cauterize the nerves in that part of your spinal cord, and you will stop feeling pain to that one side of your body. You will also not be able to feel heat and cold, so you have to watch things like hot coffee and what have you.
Yeah.
But what I heard afterwards, and my wife thankfully didn't, said, I've done this 200 times. My friends in Plymouth have done this 2,000 times. After 2 years, the feeling comes back. But I've never had a patient who survived that long.
Shit.
And I just went cold. So she had this treatment, and it took a day. I stayed in a hotel in Oldham waiting for it to pick her up. We then travelled back down. We stopped at the motorway services, and she was just tired. She was just tired, and we realised that it wasn't just the pain of the cancer that was debilitating her. She was just running out of steam. Her batteries were drained, and she could hardly do anything. So 2014 was the last Christmas that we had with her. After Christmas, into the new year, she went back in for another respite for 2-3 weeks. She then came back. She was on a morphine driver. Well, day one, I got her into bed, and she fell out of bed and pulled the driver out. So I called an ambulance. They called the hospice, and when we asked, "Do you want to go back to the hospice?" she said yes. So for the last month, 6 weeks, she was at the hospice.
That's a really difficult
She was comfortable.
decision to make, that one, isn't it?
It is, but it was the right one for her, not just for us. I mean, the kids had seen her deteriorate through all of their lives, so that wasn't the issue. It was purely, where was she going to be comfortable?
Yeah.
And she was.
Yeah.
But she steadily deteriorated. She stopped eating after the sort of last 2 weeks. She hated the food there anyway. So I was bringing food in for her that I was cooking, or going to get a Chinese for her. But she just decided that she'd had enough. So she'd got lots of friends coming round, and relatives. So she was never on her own. I went as many times as I could do. I stayed a couple of nights. Now, my sister-in-law at the time lived next door, so I was able to get her to come and look after the kids in the times that I went, just to keep things as normal as possible for them, especially with Louis.
Yeah.
We then, I got a phone call the night before Louise's birthday to say that her friends had just left, and they noticed that her breathing had changed. And did I want to know if things got worse, which I did. Yeah. So 4:30 in the morning on Louise's birthday, I got a phone call say, this might be it. So I phoned her sister up, got her to come and look after Louise and Alex. Phoned up her mom and met them at the hospice. She'd been on the ventilator for the night, but they'd taken that out just before we came in. So she was breathing on her own, but really struggling. I said my goodbyes. Mandy's mum and dad said their goodbyes. And when I was in there on my own, her breathing changed. She's very laboured. I called her mum and dad in, and auntie was also there with them. And she breathed half a dozen breaths and then was gone.
I'm so sorry.
It's funny. after 8 years, you'd think that the memory would have faded a little, but it doesn't.
No.
It's as much
I get
as whether
sorry, coughing again. I get this because you feel like the pain should lessen because it's only time you let yourself go back there. And I've realised now that I still have so much locked in trauma from that knock at the door. And you're right, I'll be 6 years in March or 8 years. When you sit and talk about the loss and how the magnitude of it and the person that that just was taken from you. And I've heard so many bits in, as you probably noticed, I make a lot of notes. And one of the things I've written down is your sort of sensation of powerlessness because your wife's in agony and you can't help her. You're relying on medical professionals. Now, I have a son with special needs. Now, he's very high functioning, but when Ben died, his behaviour was, put it this way, nobody wanted to look after him for me. And I found that really hard because what you actually need is just somebody to help you with the children. But if you have a child, particularly with quite profound special needs, who's going to volunteer for that?
Yeah. So much so that my mum, bless her, couldn't cope with Louise for more than a day, for more than a night, because she's just so intense, that she just couldn't cope. And I have to cope with her every single day of the week.
Whilst grieving,
And
your
she's
wife.
got better. She's got better. The grief with so what happened was I dealt with the funeral directors and the hospice and what have you.
The death admin.
Yeah, went to pick up Alex from school. I phoned Louise's school, but I said, just wait, leave her to come back on the school bus. We then celebrated Louise's birthday and went out for birthday tea for her. And she then says, shall we go and see Mom? And I said, no, she's very tired. Let's just leave her. And then the next morning I said to her when I was getting her up, no school today. And Mommy died last yesterday, and you don't need to go into school. And that was about all that I had from her, because.
And how did she respond?
She was awful in her own way. So I'm trying to sort out the funeral and get things organised and what have you. And I have her in my face saying, I'm not going, you can't make me. This is on the phone. I'm trying to talk to the funeral directors or the humanist or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in my face telling me, screaming at me that she's not going to go. And I'd arranged with school that if she changed her mind on the day, they would come and pick her up and take her.
Is she in a specialist school, can I ask?
She was.
She was, yeah.
She was. It's not severe learning. It's like the medium and senior school, but it's everything. It was all sorts of issues. It was a fabulous school, but she just hated it. So we went to had the funeral. So I have to put this out. You're talking about nobody wanting to help. So 2 days before my wife had died, I found up post-adoption support, Birmingham City Council, and said, my wife's dying. I've never asked you for help before, but I need some support and help. They then phoned back the next day. So this is the day before my wife had died, and said, well, you're going to need a carer then, aren't you?
Oh.
And that was it. That was the extent of the help that I got off them.
Presumably no offer to help fund this carer.
No. And then a month later, I'm struggling to get her dressed, fighting with her all the time. Like my wife, no doubt, had done through all of her school life. And I banged her elbow on the door jamb, trying to get her shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing I know, I got social services on my tail, telling, and it's like, okay. So that happened a couple of times. So the funeral was fabulous in terms of we had so many people come.
It means so much, doesn't
people
it? It
come.
means so much. I always go to a funeral if I can, because what the difference it makes to see that church or hall or wherever you hold the service absolutely jam-packed to the rafters. It can't take away your pain, but it makes you feel like you have an army around you to get you through that one day.
Absolutely. And it blew me away, the number of people who were there. So much so that I had a colleague, because I was at the time working 2 days a week in Cambridge. And one of my Cambridge colleagues came all the way over to the funeral.
Yeah.
And he said he'd never felt a funeral with so much grief. Everybody was just distraught.
She must have been a wonderful woman.
She was. So then it took me about 6 months to get into things, get the routines that I'd started putting in place, went back to work full time, and got a carer for Louise before and after school. Alex was having issues himself. So the next 2 or 3 years were pretty graphic. Alex ran away from home.
Oh, gosh.
We knew where he was. He was in contact with me, but didn't want to come home. And that was mainly to do with he'd almost been expelled from school. And he moved to a brickwork course. Was doing all right in it, but just didn't understand why he was there. When we finally got him home, he helped them, as the brickwork course place, build a room to do their English and maths. And it suddenly clicked what he was doing.
Yeah.
Because he was helping make the walls and make the electricians and all sorts.
Could kind of see the point and the purpose of it.
Yeah. So he then went through it with flying colours. Louise carried on. I was having major difficulties with Louise, which I'll go into.
And sorry, just to interrupt you again. I do apologise, Maria, but I'm just also thinking that when you have a child with quite profound special needs, it's very difficult, particularly if you are now a solo parent who is, devastated by the loss of your wife, to then be able to give all the other children what they need. Because if you have a child that is demanding so much of your time, that is physically demanding and emotionally demanding, it's very difficult to not let the others kind of get left. Does that make sense? Because I have one son that is very insular. He doesn't really talk about his feelings. He's a teenager. You don't see so much of him. Whereas I've got, well, she's now 6. She's no longer such a pain in the backside, but she was 6 months old. So I had a kind of toddler that was trying to, kill herself at every available opportunity, as they do. And I had a child with autism that I didn't know anything about, and I was grieving, and I had another child. It's where do you get the headspace? Each of these individual issues is massive, and it's a battle. Everything's a battle.
Yeah, it as I said, we just seem to pick up issues along the way. So I had some issues with Alex, but at the end of the day, so he went to live with his partner, his now wife. So this was at the age of 16, he moved in with her and her mum and family. But then things have happened along the way. But after 6 years of being together, they've got 3 kids.
Wow.
She had already had one, which is one of the issues, was that he had met this older by a couple of years woman at the age of 15, and that was the only reason that social services were on to us, not because had run away, but because he was in this relationship with an older woman,
and I suppose had it been the other way around,
underage sex.
Yeah.
But she had a baby, but it wasn't his. It was another partner's or ex-partner. So there was lots of things that are happening with them that I was having to deal with. Louise, as I said, was an issue. But that first year, after about 6 months, I got my shit together in terms of routines and everything, and I was back to work. I then found way. I got told it by a couple of Mandy's friends. And the way that they advertised it, for want of a better word, to me, was there's 4 women for every man.
Oh, I see, like a dating app, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not interested. Not interested. No. It's because you'll have more. Actually, I'm not too sure what they were trying to sell it to me as.
But I felt the same about Way. I looked at the brochure and I was like, oh, there's people in hiking boots looking happy up a mountain. I just I wanted friends that I could drink wine and cry with at this point in my life. And I found those friends in Way, as it happens also. And I'm sure you're going to a very similar thing to me, but you feel like you found your tribe and you break off into little groups. And many of my friends are friends that I made in Way, and they are my friends for life.
Well, I had when I joined, I had a meeting with over the phone with an area contact who wasn't the area contact. West Midlands didn't have one, but she just liked doing these telephone calls. I think, and I realised that there was nothing in the area. So within a month of joining Way, I had become the area contact, and I started doing that as well.
Bloody well done.
Well, the problem was that with everything that I was doing, I did it for 7 years, but I was struggling to give as much attention as I could do. So I left feeling very despondent about that. But so after a month, I became area contact. I'd also met another group called War, who were a new widowed group and were touting for business within Way, which was very naughty. But I joined.
And what does it stand for? It's widowed and...
Yeah.
Can you tell me, or is it rude? I don't know.
So no, it's whoever you hear it from. So it's usually widows are ready, but or it could be widows are rebels, or widows are randy. It's all according
that's my favourite.
Who says it.
I think I might have been in War at some point. I was in another one called Widow's Fireplace, which was set up by Katie Hibbard, who's one of my best friends.
I'm also Widow's Fireplace. Yeah. I'm also in a number of different ones. And the thing about it was that I thought, what am I getting into? And the first night that I joined, somebody said, so, has anybody been in a threesome? And I almost spat out my drink. thinking,
What have I
what the
entered
hell
into?
happened? And I thought nobody's going to come back and say anything. And then you get replies going, yep, that's me, yep. And I'm like, oh my God. But it calmed down. And one of the admins, Paul, was constantly sending every day a dad joke. And we'd all then complain about him in terms of how awful they were. And it was just for the crack.
Yeah.
I then got a message from Catherine. We were all complaining about New Year's Eve and how crap it is for widows and what have you. And I got a message. We all got a message from Catherine saying, "Oh, sod it. Who wants to come to my house for New Year's Eve?" And at the time, there was about 90 of us, and we all got a message inviting us for.
Please tell me you didn't all
New
turn
Year's
up.
Eve.
Can you imagine?
Well, there was 10 of us, which is pretty good.
But a little bit less intimidating than 90.
But I was going downhill, and December is my worst month. So it's my wife's birthday on the 7th. This is Christmas. So my first Christmas, I'm having to deal with giving the kids Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 22nd, it would have been my 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The 22nd of December, do you say?
Yes.
That was the date John and I were meant to get married, you know. That was our planned wedding. We had everything planned for a Christmas wedding, and then COVID shut us down.
I think you've said something about that.
Yeah, that was meant to be our wedding anniversary, and it was my great-grandparents' wedding anniversary as well. So I really feel attached to that 22nd of December. That's sorry, just as you were.
So I was really struggling. Plus, I'd missed some counselling due to work, which really upset me. Mm-hmm. And it culminated on Christmas Day, going to my mum's and having a mini nervous breakdown. Go on to that's a word.
Yeah.
And in my Sunday best, trying to walk up Kent Hills in the pouring rain to be with my wife, who I'd scattered her ashes there.
Oh, darling.
I got halfway up the hill and could feel the mud oozing through into my shoes, and just went home, left the kids with mum, and just cried for the rest of the day. Finally went back, had to apologise her, even though it was her fault. And yeah, so that happened. New Year's Eve happened, though. My son was at his partner's for Christmas, for New Year, and somebody, my in-law at the time, looked after Louise, and I went up and spent Christmas Eve with a bunch of widows that I'd never met, and it was just fabulous. Lots of crying and lots of it, but it was eye-opening to be with people who just knew who I was and how I felt.
Yeah, there's something so powerful in this, and it's kind of the first thing I direct anybody that's freshly widowed to is to join a support group, to start off with Way, then find the offshoot groups like you created. And so much of our communication, especially with lockdown, etc., gets done online. You know, it's Facebook groups, it's WhatsApp chats. And so really you can have your tribe can exist everywhere in the world. I mean, you probably saw I met up with some of my American widow friends. But to have that, to physically be in a room with people that understand what you've been through and that genuinely give a shit, and they're not worried about the fact that you might cry and ruin New Year's Eve.
Absolutely.
And I regularly try and get my tribe together because there's just something so powerful about being together.
So not just Way, but all of these different little groups, well, not so little now, have been helpful in doing that. So I went into the new year met my new partner. That's such a long way. The conversations I won't.
You can give us the highlights. Give us the highlights.
Oh no! Seriously, we met on a blind date in War, and one of the first things that she said to me was that she'd been what's the word, stalking my Facebook pictures.
Right.
And in my Facebook pictures on my old profile was me going in for a day for Red Nose Day as Debbie.
Yeah.
And it had been all of a dare. I got lots of money for charity work, but at the end of the day, me and my wife knew that it was actually what I wanted to do. So I had known that I was different since about the age of 12, 13, because I was nicking my mum's clothes. But then I grew and got older. Things didn't continue because I didn't know how to. I didn't know it was a thing. I just thought it was me. And it wasn't until I was married and I'd bought some stuff for my wife for Christmas that she didn't like. And I put it on and thought, oh, okay, I remember this. So she was not particularly happy about this, but because she loved me, I was okay to get dressed at times.
And would you do that at home or would you go out in public?
No. So this was at home. This was all. So for 25 years, it was all in the closet.
And the world's come a long way in 25 years, haven't it? Back
yeah,
then.
Yeah, definitely. And we never argued, except for this. So if I was sort of allowed to be this at times, but there would be times then I wanted to get out and she wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
And we'd argue, and it was the only thing that we argued about.
And do you think she was worried about you being, ridiculed or humiliated?
It was very much like that. What will the neighbours say?
Yeah.
And it became. But when she then realised she was dying, over the 3 years of the second bout of cancer, we went out during the day 5 times. And she, I'd like to think that she realised that things had got better over the years, that it wasn't so much of a
secret, like a dirty secret. It's
and like the rest of the LGBTQ, people realise that if that's who you are, then that's who you are. So she was getting me out there ready. So when I met my new partner, who's also called Mandy.
You're joking?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it makes things easy, I suppose.
Well, it does, but it doesn't. When you're having conversations, we having to do a new Mandy and the old Mandy.
You know what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to do Dead and Alive Mandy. You're going to have to.
Yeah. Well, it's Mandy, my angel, Mandy, but she's not so new now. So she'd been seeing these pictures, and on that first evening talking over the phone, she said, "Do you do this often?" And I sort of, well, actually, yes, I do. And she was like, okay. But then when she came to see me, and I've got a walk-in wardrobe, and on the one side was my wife's clothes, and a little bit of it was my old other side of me clothes.
Is that how you'd refer to it, the other side of you?
Yeah, I do now.
Yeah.
And then in boxes around the room was Maria. And it took her about 18 months to realise that this wasn't just a knicker fetish. This wasn't just, something that I needed to get off on. This is how I want to be in my life.
Yeah.
So I came out in May 2017. I had to go to get some pop, because I'm not allowed to drink. And I was at Mandy's for reasons too complicated to explain. And I just got changed, and she said, "Well, you've got the car. You're the only one who drives. Well, why don't you go to Sainsbury's to go and get something?" So I nervously went to the middle of a Saturday afternoon to the huge Sainsbury's, walked up into the wines and spirits, and as I turn the corner, right in front of me is a woman. She looks at me, and I look at her in a onesie and slippers, and all I can think of is, you dare say anything about what I look like. I went off and got the drink, came or paid for it, and went back home, back to Mandy's, and was so pleased with my reaction. I spoke to a couple of widow friends, and one, Jess, said, "Why don't you tell Wall? Why don't you tell everybody?"
Was that Jess? Rainbow hair Jess?
Yes.
Lovely Jess.
Yes, it is.
No, I thought it might.
In fact, she has saved my life in a number of ways.
Has she? She's a wonderful woman.
Because I was struggling. I just come out and I got videos from her on how to do eyeliner. And how to blend and it's just.
I wonder if she'd send me some.
Well, have you seen her eyes?
Oh, I mean, she's stunning, isn't she? I know.
Anyway, and I went from 10 people knowing about me, to 400 people knowing about me. And I got so much positivity from it, that 6 months later, I'm going into work and saying, I want to come out of work.
What did you do for work? Was it a very male-dominated job, or I'm just
more? I work in IT.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a mix, but it's not a macho thing in any way, shape or form.
John's background is in IT, and I think you get all sorts working in IT, don't you? He said he
absolutely,
loved.
Absolutely. So, but the thing was that I went to work dressed as me, got within a mile of the office, and chickened out and got changed. Aww. I was so disgusted with my reaction that I went up to HR and said, "Look, I want to do this. This is who I am. I want to plan this out. How can you help me?" They organised things with the comms to send out a message on an afternoon when there was no other messages coming out from the company to announce me. And I was in a meeting just before the announcement went out, and I worked in a large open plan office, about 50 people in that bit of the office. And I'm looking around, waiting for people to stand up and turn around to me and point, and gasps of shock and nothing.
No.
Absolutely nothing. It was such an anticlimax.
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No one cares.
Yeah, well, it wasn't so much that no one cared. So I got about a dozen people sending me messages saying, "Brilliant, well done."
That's kind.
But everybody else was like, meh.
Yeah, well, this is what I meant, rather than they don't care. I meant more that it's just sort of like, you do you. I'm really, I can feel that fear for you for, having to stop and change halfway. And it must have taken so much bravery to do this, because we just spoke, about how far we've come in terms of LGBTQ. Have I got them all?
LGBTQ.
LGBT. Sorry, I'm awful. That we've come so far, and for your work colleagues and your workspace to be so accommodating and accepting of this quite significant change. Well, I say quite significant, it's a really significant change, but you refer to yourself as you now. And
Yes.
that must have come with so much liberation that you were able to live your life as you always felt that you should. Have you met with any sort of negativity as a result of it?
To be honest, no.
No, I'm really pleased to hear that.
In fact, the negativity has come within me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got made redundant after 29 and a half years. They couldn't even give me the 30 years.
Oh.
And I had been going into work, say, 3 times a week as me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just painted my nails. Can you see those?
I can. They look beautiful.
They're mine. They're not stick-ons.
They're fully grown.
Yes, and I'd put this gel coating on. I'd got them all professionally done, and then I got made redundant. But within 3 weeks, I had got an interview for a 6-month contract. So I'm like, oh, what do I do? Do I go in for the interview? So I went in as my other self.
Mm-hmm.
Had this all stripped off. Went in for the interview, and at the end of the interview, and they said, "Yeah, we'd like you to join." I said, "Look, I'm looking to transition. What can you do for me?" And they said, "Okay, first day you come in, we'll give you a picture of as your one self, and then whenever you want to come in and we'll do you another picture." So they were really accommodating, so much so that one of the lovely girls that I was working with, I changed probably twice, flip-flopped for about a week.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Look, if you want to be Maria, just bloody come in as Maria."
Yeah.
so that's what I did. And I never used that other picture again.
And it's interesting, at the beginning of our interview, I often ask my guests if there's anything that you really don't want to talk about, anything that you'd like me to steer clear of. And the one thing that you asked me to do was not to ask you of your, what did you refer to it as, your dead name?
Dead name.
Your dead name. So I'm obviously I'm not going to ask you, but do you feel freer? Do you feel more liberated? Do you feel more able to be? I hate this term, authentic self.
Absolutely. And the thing was that because I was starting at a new place, the only people who have issues and remember my other name are my cousin, who I've known all my life. You know, he has real problems talking to me because he'll say my other name, and it's like, don't worry about it. Oh, it's not a problem.
Yeah, and I think people are so scared of offending or saying the wrong thing. Sometimes they will almost avoid the situation altogether. But actually, if you're curious, as I am, and I'm asking questions, that's how we find out more.
Yeah, but at my new work, they only know me as Maria.
Yeah,
and it's actually me that has the issue. So I'm working away, and my boss, when I'm in the office, has often gone, Maria, and I'm like, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
And I look up, and it does when I'm concentrating. Having a new name is a strange
I bet it
thing
is
to think about. But I've gone forward.
And your new partner obviously embraces Maria entirely.
Yes, very much so.
So can I ask the question, how would you, and again, this is me asking questions that I know nothing about, so if I'm inappropriate, please tell me. But you talk about going through transition. Are you going to have full transition into a woman?
Okay, so this is where I'm struggling at the moment in terms of how people like myself are portrayed in the media, in the conversation about us, in that all trans people are still with the genitals of
You can say.
they were born with. And the fact of the matter is that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I started transitioning proper in January 2020. I've put myself on the waiting list for to see a consultant at Northampton GIC, which is the nearest gender identity clinic near me. So that's an hour and a half journey. And I got a letter back from them in September of 2020 to say it will be at least 40 months till I see a consultant.
Wow.
So it's been 40 months, really. And they are looking at people who are on the waiting list from 2018. So I know I have at least 2 more years
Before you can
before I can even say hello to a consultant, let alone know what my body is able to do. I'm diabetic, I've got high blood pressure, I'm in my 50s now. I don't know what I can have, to be honest.
Yeah.
But if somebody said to me, we can wave a wand and you can have whatever surgery you need to make you feel better about yourself, I would take it and run with it.
Yeah.
But I really don't know at the moment, Rosie.
Yeah. And that's a perfectly valid answer as well, because it is obviously it's an enormous operation and an enormous step to take. And you have been through so much turmoil and heartache. It's probably, in a way, almost, I'm not saying that waiting lists are good, but maybe to give you the chance to really think about it.
Oh, well, yeah, but I've been thinking about it for the last 50 years.
Well, there is that, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
so
yeah, okay, yeah, fair play.
It's not that. It is really, I want to go and see a doctor, consultant, and say, what can I do?
Yeah.
What is my body going to be able to do with? I can't. I know of people who have gone and got black market, for want of a better word, hormones from other countries to get started, who are paying private. I haven't got that money. I don't, and I don't want to go and get hormones from somewhere else because I don't know whether my body can cope with those things.
Yeah,
I want to do some. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say I'm perimenopausal, which is comes with its own catalogue of problems.
Yes.
And I'm in a similar position because I want just somebody to tell me what's going on with my body, what hormones will help assist with my crashing moods, and sort of somebody to have oversight of my gynecological health, I suppose, for want of a better reason. Now, I have paid private because I imagine that the cost of my private consultation is a lot less than yours. Because of the nature of, I can just go and see a gynecologist. But even then, there's waiting lists. I was ignored by them. I was sent a prescription out with absolutely no indicator of how to do it. And so you just want somebody to kind of not take control, but just have oversight of and just be able to say to you, this is this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and lay out those options for you.
And at the end of the day, it's very much like the treatment that my wife had to go through in terms of, here's the risks to it. This is what it's going to do. This is not what it's going to do. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
A couple of weeks before she died, she was deteriorating quite fast, and they thought that her cancer had moved to her brain, and they wanted to take her back to hospital to do some tests. Now, we didn't know she was that close to death, but we said no. she's comfortable where she is. We know this is happening. There's no point. Why get her into the stress of moving her, being in a very loud, noisy hospital when she's fine where she is? And when you're given the options, when you're given the choices that you need to make a decision, you can then do that. But at the moment, I have nothing.
Yeah.
And all I have is the bombardment of media and that's saying I'm not real. I don't exist. I'm a man in a dress who all they want to do is get into women's spaces. I've been transitioning for 3.5 years now. I've been into 3 women's toilets, and that's purely because they were in pubs. And if I'd gone into the men's ones, I would have had the crap beaten out of me.
Yeah.
But I needed to go. I will plan out trips out so that I know that I've got somewhere like a Costa that does single-sex toilets, not single-sex, unisex toilets that I can go into without any issues.
And these are things that people who are, born the cis, it is in the cis female gender or male gender, just wouldn't even consider. I wouldn't even consider things like where would you go to use the bathroom? And of course, by talking about this and humanizing what you're going through, what you're doing is you're taking power away from the media and this kind of narrative that's out there, and you're telling people the reality of living through transition and trying to find acceptance in a world that isn't set up to support you yet.
No. Can I put another thing that I'm really proud of?
Please
and
do.
That's to do with WAY. So along with being an area of contact, I was invited to become ambassador for WAY 3 years ago now.
Congratulations.
And I am there to support the LGBTQ members. I've also got a toe in other things because while my daughter's disabled, I do a lot of EDI work to do with disability. I think WAY is a fantastic group of people. It's the things that we can do when we know about other people in the same, I wouldn't say exactly like us, because every path to where we are now is different.
Yeah.
Every person is different, but we all have the same nugget of truth in that our partners died. And just having that at times is enough. I've had telephone meetings with newbies to the group, and I've heard them visibly relax when I tell them about me, and I tell them about WAY, because they realise that they have people around them that they can talk to, and not be patronised, and not be
So head
comforted.
The head tilt. Sometimes you just want an opportunity to sort of just rant about the fucking injustice of it. And you must maybe like me, the early hours of the night, there's always somebody available to talk to. And I love that you have taken this tragedy that happened to you, and also this life-changing event that you're going through at the moment. And instead of kind of, woe is me, poor me, what you have chosen to do is to become an ambassador and an advocate for people going through a similar experience. And this idea that every path and every journey is different is absolutely spot on. I could speak to 4 people in a week who have lost somebody to cancer or COVID or even suicide. Every single person who died is different. Every single journey to that end is different. And every single survivor, and that's us, is different. And we've all chosen different routes to healing and different routes to surviving. But what I notice in these interviews is the people that come on and talk to me, every single one of you has pulled yourself out, and decided to turn this into something. I can't bring myself to say positive, because the death of somebody you love will never be positive, but you work with what you've got. And
Yes,
I love what you're doing to support other people. I think that's really admirable.
And off air, you said about being brave.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, it's no different to being the widow. And in fact, if I think about it, the one thing that has come out of being a widow is almost a widow's mantra, I found. You have one life to live, so go and live it.
Yeah.
And I needed the affirmation from my partner to sort of say, look, I'm okay with you doing this. But at the end of the day, it's me that's living this. It's me that's going and having to stick my face out there and say, this is me. And I have no regrets in doing that, because at the end of the day, this is me.
Yeah.
I've wanted this for such a long time. I didn't, because my wife wanted me as my other self.
Yeah.
And I love my wife. And I would never hear anything about, well, your wife stopped you from doing what. No. I love my wife. I love my kids. My kids knew about me. In fact, they tried to out me. My daughter, at the age of 10, tried to out me to my mother and my mother-in-law.
Thanks, Louise.
And then both me and my wife, got the shock of our lives when we got told, oh, yeah, we know.
Oh.
And it's like, oh, okay. My mom knew because I was stealing her clothes.
Not quite as sneaky as you thought you were.
Yeah, exactly. And my mother-in-law knew, because the pots of the piles of clothes that went to get ironed had some of mine in. But there have been some downsides to this. I've lost friends.
And do you think that's the widowhood or the transition? Because
no, well, it's a bit of both. It's more to do with this now.
Yeah.
But I've also lost Mandy's family. I pretty much got excommunicated. We thought it was.
I'm so sorry.
We thought it was to do with me having a partner.
Yeah.
But then, because they wouldn't invite, they invited the kids, but they wouldn't invite me and Mandy to the parties that they had. But then my mother-in-law told me that it was to do with this.
So hurtful.
And for the last 5 years, I've not spoken to them. Yeah, I'm disappointed, but the reason why this has happened is because they've not told my father-in-law anything about me, and therefore me turning up at the doorstep would cause them all sorts of problems.
I mean, I'd be quite tempted to do it, Maria. Get yourself something really pink and flouncy.
Well, I don't live that far away. I have plenty of things that are pink and flouncy. What was I going to say? Yeah, I don't live that far away from them. So if they had met me at the supermarket, it's not my problem. It really is.
No, of course it's not.
So it's things have changed. Things will well, as we all know, things will never be the same. Mine is just an added, well, and then some.
Yeah.
But we're getting on. My daughter is coming up to 21.
Gosh, is she? I was just going to ask how Louise was doing.
Yeah, she's all right. She's not doing a lot, and the help is not out there that I can find to be able to help her as much as she would like to get out in the world. But she's trying. She's doing some nail art.
Oh, that'd be handy.
Courses. So she's next week she's going to do a manicure and a gel painting course. And I'm there to support her. My son, as I said, he now lives in Stafford with 3 kids and a wife, and horrid neighbours and everything that young families have to deal with. But he's off and doing
Making
it.
his life.
I struggle with things. I did a fabulous thing last year for a charity called Dying Matters, where I had my photo taken by a very famous photographer called Rankin, with a blown up picture of my wife. It was on an exhibition. I was in the paper, in the Guardian, and I have, in fact, can you hold on?
Yes, of course.
Oops.
Cracking legs, by the way, Maria. I couldn't see them when you were sitting down.
Oh, snags.
Oh, snags. I love snags.
Well, again, it's another thing that I'm sort of infamous for. I've been stopped in the street because my pictures have been everywhere. You see them.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can I use that on your for your picture on your?
Of course, yeah. I'll send.
Oh, what a beautiful picture! You look stunning, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, that was again another long story, but I sort of went in for a competition, for want of a better word, to be in this exhibition of people who have lost loved ones and to be pictured with them by Rankin.
Wow.
And that in itself is just another story that I'm hoping to do some blogs about all these things.
I hope you do. And if you ever want to do it audio, as in what we're doing here, I would be more than happy to facilitate this for you, to enable you to record it, and then I can store it for you. You don't have to do it on my podcast. But I wanted to do a blog. I don't.
What are you doing this?
This is it, and I'm going to be launching a new podcast fairly soon called Rosie FM, which is going to be because I don't shut up, and it's going to address all sorts of different issues that affect me personally, because grief is only one aspect of who I am and the life I live. So if you ever, like I say, I find this like I'm going to treat it almost like an Audible blog. And because I have the tech and the facilities here, and because you would always be welcome to my home, you could always come here and record anything you wish to, because I find it incredibly therapeutic. And my goodness, you have some stories. And I feel like we've only just scratched the surface today.
Yes, unfortunately. As I said, life has never been easy. There are things that have happened that we wished never have happened, but we've gone through them. Mm-hmm. My wife, her illness didn't become her. She was still my wife. She was still a mom. She loved us. It just got in the way, and she made it as normal as she could do. I'm trying to do that not as successful as my wife. I have had some awful fights with my daughter over as she's got older.
Yeah.
I know my wife would be cursing me because I don't go and see my son often enough. I know that she'd be driving him potty if she was still here. But that's not me. I've let him get on with things as he wants, and I'm there for him.
Yeah.
He needs to come and see me. And
You're listening, Alex.
But if you're listening, Alex. But it's not that much of a problem.
So would you say? Sorry, I've overtook. I'm a nightmare for it. I do apologise. It's because I told you it's because I'm not good at the eye contact.
And I waffle. So
no, you don't waffle at all. You speak incredibly eloquently, and I have loved this episode so far. I guess I want to ask you if you're happy, because that's a really difficult question to answer sometimes. But because you're carrying such an enormous weight of sadness. But I personally, unless I'm in the black dog, as I affectionately call it, or the snake, I'm happy. I'm happy. I love Ben, and I use that present tense because I do still love him. And I love John, and I love my beautiful 4 children, and I love my beautiful home and my friends and my family. I love to be able to do this. But am I happy? Yeah, I am happy, but I'm also sad. And I think that never really changes.
No, not really. There are things that I remember her by. When Donovan's Reef, a John Wayne film, comes on the telly, and I'm like, oh God, not again, because it was her favourite film. When I hear, so we talked a little about her funeral and what she wanted, and one of the things that she said was, she didn't say much about the music, but one of the things that she wanted was Johnny hates jazz.
Right.
So I knew I remember them, but I couldn't remember much about them. So I found the first one that came along. I thought, right, okay, we'll use this, and it's Broken Dreams, and we used it at when the coffin comes out of the hearse, and you walk into the crematorium. And as I'm walking into the crematoria, this song comes out, and I'm listening to the words. And by all means, go and listen to the words.
I've written it down. I'm going
to. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is just not it's like, it's your fault.
Oh,
this is where yeah, pretty much. And I'm like, yeah, thanks very much for that. But I have a collection of songs that, if I'm down, I think, oh, just listen to them, get it out of your system, get the tears out.
I have a Spotify list called Ben. I have a Spotify list called Ben, and it's his favourite songs. It's songs that reminded me of him. And because I struggle to express my emotions and I'm using inverted commas here, in a sort of neurologically normal way, I can go from my emotions flip very well. Most women, actually, my emotions can flip. And sometimes I knew that I needed to make myself cry. So I would put the playlist on and I would go through photos and I would kind of force myself to have this big fat cry. And it's very therapeutic to do it. It is. You've got to, 5 hours staring at a wall, not ideal. But sometimes you have to remember the life that you lost and the person that you lost, because if we don't, then who?
Definitely, and the problem that this picture gave me, and still does to a certain extent, is that she's never seen me.
Yes.
She's never really seen me as this,
yes.
as being permanent. What would she say if you were sitting on a garden bench with her ghost? What would she say about me? What would she say about how I've done with the kids? I'd like to think she would be proud of where we are.
From an outsider, I can say that my assumption is that she would be, because you've climbed some mountains, my love.
It's still there.
Yeah.
I can't get over. You were talking to somebody. I was listening to one of your episodes about a person who lost their partner by suicide, and this is nothing like that. I don't have any questions about my wife's treatment, or what she had, how she had it. I've got no anger to her, but since transitioning, this question of what she would think of me keeps coming up, and I don't think it'll ever go away.
No, and I can, and to a certain extent, I can relate a little bit. Only in terms of my kind of autism diagnosis and my ADHD diagnosis, which happened after Ben died. And I've talked to other people for whom basically your grief prevents you from being able to mask anymore. So, you let your freak flag fly. Now, it's not the same, but I wonder whether I would have gone through that process, because I feel like I've lived most of my life through a glass window, kind of not really fitting in. And now, as I accept who I am as an autistic woman in a neurotypical world, I'm realizing that it isn't me. I'm not broken. Sometimes I feel like I am, but sorry, this is kind of not gone round on a bit of a tangent. But yeah, you do wonder what they would have made of the life that you live. I genuinely believe that he would have been pretty, not happy is not the right word, but he would be proud that John is the father figure in my children's life, because he's a really good dad. And I think that sometimes when I'm lying in a heap and I think to myself, he'd be saying to you, just get up. Like, you got to keep going, girl. You've got to keep going. And essentially we do have to keep going. But like we do with the music or the photographs, if you let a little bit of the sadness kind of seep out, it hopefully prevents the enormous tsunami that comes out if you shove it down. But I think from everything that you've told me and everything that I've heard in our interview today, I hear nothing that wouldn't make me proud if you were my wife. And I think that you are incredible. And I think, I just wish you, and you're alive, Mandy. See, I'm going to do it for you. I wish that you have every happiness together. And at some point, I would love to meet you both. So keep your ears peeled.
Well, I'll put you on a friend.
Yeah, you must. And we hosted a little version of Woodstock here this year. And plans are definitely underway for a much bigger version next year. So we are going to be holding a festival, kids friendly, everybody friendly. So I'll let you know, because if we don't manage to do it before then, you'll certainly be invited.
Thank you.
But for now, my darling, you take such good care of yourself. And if anybody else, if anybody has questions that they'd like to ask me, or they would like to ask Maria, I'm more than happy to pass them over to her. I can't guarantee that she'll answer them, but feel free to ask. And once again, just thank you for giving us all an insight into a very different type of grief and a very different life post-grief. But it looks like it's a wonderful life that you've created.
Thank you. Thank you.
Best of luck to you, my darling. And
thank you.
And for everybody else, just look after yourselves. And John and I will be back on Friday. Lots of love.